There is a door at the center of the most powerful empire on earth, and the law about that door is absolute. You do not walk through it unless you are called. Not a servant, not a general, not a prince with armies behind him. Everyone in this palace knows the rule. You wait, however long it takes, however urgent the reason, however much is burning down outside those walls. You wait, because the alternative is death. On this particular morning, a woman is standing in front of that door anyway. She is the Queen of Persia. She sleeps in the finest room in the finest palace in the world. The most powerful man alive chose her above every other woman in the empire. She has access to more wealth than most people will see in a lifetime, and she has not been called. Outside these walls, her people are already marked for death. The date has been set. The decree has been signed and sealed with the king's own ring and sent to every corner of the empire. On a specific day, in a specific month, anyone in the empire is legally authorized to kill every Jewish man, woman, and child they can find and take everything they own. The queen has known this for 3 days. She also knows something the king does not know, something no one inside this palace knows. The people in that decree are her people. The death sentence signed by her husband's ring is a death sentence for everyone she came from. She has spent her entire adult life making sure no one knew that about her. And now she is standing at the door that could kill her, wearing her royal robes, with no invitation and no way of knowing whether the man on the other side will extend the golden scepter or call for her execution. Her name is Esther, but that is not the name she was born with. The city of Susa in the 5th century before Christ is not what most people picture when they imagine the ancient world. It is not mud huts and dirt roads. It is not a primitive civilization feeling its way toward something better. Susa is the winter capital of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, one of the largest empires the ancient world had yet known, stretching from the western edge of modern Turkey all the way to the Indus Valley. It governed somewhere between 40 and 50 million people across more than 20 different nations, each with its own language, its own customs, its own gods. The palace complex at Susa alone covers nearly 3 acres. French archaeologists excavating the site in the 1800s uncovered fragments of glazed brick walls decorated with images of royal guards in brilliant blue and gold, so carefully preserved that you can stand in the Louvre today and look at the soldiers who once walked the corridors where this story takes place. This is not a fairy tale kingdom. This is geography. The king who sits on the throne during the events of this story is known in the Hebrew text as Ahasuerus. In Greek historical sources, he is Xerxes I, son of Darius the Great, the same king whose army crossed into Greece. The same figure the historian Herodotus wrote about as one of the defining rulers of the ancient world. He is not a simple man and not a stupid one. But to understand everything that happens in this story, you have to understand one principle, one rule that governs every decision this empire makes, from the feast in the opening chapter to the decree that nearly destroys an entire people. Power here is not just held, it is performed. In the ancient world, and in this empire especially, if people cannot see your power, they begin to question whether it exists. Once they question it, it starts to erode. This is why the book of Esther opens with a feast that lasts 180 days, 6 months. The king gathers every noble, every official, every military commander from every province, and he puts on a display of wealth and glory so complete and so sustained that no one who attends it can go home and pretend they did not see it with their own eyes. After 6 months, there is a second feast, 7 days, for everyone in the citadel of Susa, from the greatest to the least. The drinks come in golden vessels, no two alike. The court is paved with precious stones. The text notes that drinking was done without compulsion, meaning each guest could drink as much or as little as he chose. Even that detail is a form of display. Only a king secure enough in his abundance can afford to not force his guests to drink. The queen, Vashti, is simultaneously holding a feast for the women inside the palace. Now picture what this empire actually is. Not the architecture. The logic underneath the architecture. In this world, your position is only as real as your ability to keep performing it. The moment you stop performing your role, the system begins looking for someone who will. The feast is not extravagance for its own sake. It is the mechanism through which power renews itself. By being seen, confirmed, and witnessed by the people whose acknowledgement makes it real. Every character in this story will navigate that logic. Vashti will refuse it. Esther will master it. Mordecai will challenge it from the threshold. Haman will weaponize it. And eventually a woman standing at a door she was not supposed to walk through will use it to dismantle something the system never intended to be dismantled. But that is the end of the story. We are at the beginning. The king's heart is merry with wine. It is the 7th day of the second feast. And he gives an order that will set everything in motion. He commands his 7 eunuchs to bring Queen Vashti before him, wearing the royal crown. He wants to show her beauty to his guests. The assembled power of the empire, gathered in the courtyard of his palace. Vashti refuses to come, and the world inside this palace begins to shake in a way that no army has ever made it shake. On the 7th day of the feast, when the king's heart was merry with wine, the command goes out, "Bring Queen Vashti. Let her appear before the king and his guests wearing the royal crown. Let them see her beauty." She refuses. The text does not tell us what she said. It does not give us her reasoning, her tone, her expression, or any record of what happened in the room where she received the command. It gives us the act and nothing else. The order came. She said no. That is the complete account of Vashti's side of this moment. And then the palace comes apart. The king's anger burns. He consults his 7 wise men, the officials who know law and judgment, the men whose counsel shapes the governance of the empire. What they say to him in that room is worth reading carefully, because it is more revealing about the system they are protecting than about the woman they are removing. They do not say the queen has embarrassed you personally and you should respond accordingly. They say the queen has not only wronged the king, she has wronged every official and every person in every province of the empire. Because when word of what she has done spreads, every woman in the empire will look at her husband with contempt. What Vashti has done is not a private matter between a husband and a wife at a party. It is a precedent and precedence in a system built entirely on visible hierarchy, are existential threats. Their solution is a royal decree, sent to every province, written in every language of the empire, declaring that every man should be master in his own household. A royal decree, empire-wide, in every language across 23 nations, because one woman said no to one dinner invitation. Stay with the scale of that response. The most powerful government in the ancient world just deployed the full machinery of imperial legislation to manage the fact that a queen refused to appear at a party. The decree is so disproportionate to the event that triggered it that it becomes, without intending to, a confession. This is what frightened power looks like when it needs to reassert itself. Secure power does not panic. Secure power does not need to issue empire-wide proclamations about household authority because one woman stayed in her own room. Real power does not panic over one person saying no. What the reaction of those 7 wise men reveals is that the entire hierarchy of this empire rests on something more fragile than it appears from the outside. The performance only works when everyone keeps performing. The moment someone stops, and the moment that stopping goes unpunished. The whole thing is in danger of people noticing that it was always, at some level, voluntary. Vashti did not threaten this empire with an army or a conspiracy or a rival claim to the throne. She threatened it by showing that the performance could be interrupted, that a queen could say no, and the ceiling would not immediately fall, so the ceiling had to fall on her instead. Quickly, publicly, in a way that sent a message to every household in every province in every language. Vashti disappears from the story after this. The text does not tell us what happened to her. She is simply gone, removed. The position of queen is declared vacant, and the search for a replacement begins. Most tellings of Esther treat this as prologue, an explanation for why the queen position needed to be filled, a mechanical setup for Esther's entrance, something to move past on the way to the real story. That reading misses what Vashti is actually doing in this narrative. Vashti is the first answer to the question that runs through the entire book of Esther. What does it cost to be visible in the wrong way inside this empire? Her answer is everything. Position, title, future, presence in the story itself. Gone. Not because she committed violence, not because she threatened the king, because she refused to be displayed, because in one moment, in one room, she decided that the thing being asked of her was a thing she would not do. Now think about what Esther is going to spend the next several years inside this same palace doing. Esther will learn to be visible in exactly the right way. She will become so skilled at showing people what they need to see that the king will fall in love with her without knowing who she is. She will navigate every room, every conversation, every protocol of this palace with a precision that Vashti either could not or would not perform. She will survive and rise and be crowned and celebrated. And eventually, she will arrive at a moment where she has to decide whether the life she has built on careful performance is the same thing as actually being alive. Vashti shows her, before she ever enters the palace, what this place does to women who step outside their assigned role. She shows her the exact mechanism by which the system removes people who refuse to perform. But Vashti also shows her something else, something quieter, something the text does not announce, but that sits in the narrative like a stone in still water. There is a version of this story where a woman who has everything says no anyway, where the calculation of consequences is made and set aside, where the thing being asked is simply refused. Not because the refusal can be protected, not because the outcome will be favorable, but because some things are worth refusing regardless of the cost. Vashti pays the cost completely. The decree goes out. The feast ends. The wise men go home satisfied that the precedent has been addressed. And somewhere in Susa, in a household that does not look remarkable from the outside, the search for a new queen is about to find a young woman with 2 names and a secret she has been taught to keep. One queen said no and disappeared from history. The other queen will have to decide, when the moment comes, what she is willing to risk and why, and whether survival on the palace's terms is the same thing as actually being alive. Her name at birth was Hadassah. In Hebrew, the word means myrtle. It is a low-growing plant found near water sources across the ancient Near East. Persistent and unassuming. The kind of plant that survives in conditions that would kill something less rooted. Later, Jewish readers found resonance in the name for the life she lived. Whether the author of the book intended all of that, or whether readers found it there afterward, is difficult to say with certainty. But as a literary image, it fits the person she was about to become. Her parents were dead. The text states this as background fact. The kind of information that shapes everything about a person without ever being directly discussed again. She had been taken in and raised by her cousin Mordecai, a man from the tribe of Benjamin whose family had been carried out of Jerusalem into exile by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. Generations before this story takes place. Generations. Esther is not a recent refugee. She does not carry a personal memory of Jerusalem or the temple or the land her ancestors came from. She is 3rd or 4th generation diaspora. Persia is the only world she has ever known. The language of this empire is her language. The customs of this city are the customs she grew up inside. She is, in every practical sense of the word, Persian. except for the one part of herself she was taught, carefully and deliberately, to keep invisible. Mordecai instructs her not to reveal her people or her kindred. Most readers move past this instruction quickly, treating it as a plot device that sets up the later revelation. It is not a plot device. It is the decision that defines everything Esther does for the first half of the story. And understanding why Mordecai made it requires understanding something about how diaspora communities survive inside empires that were not built for them. The Jewish community in Persia at this time is not a persecuted community in the way that word is usually understood. They are not in labor camps. They are not subject to systematic violence under Persian law. The Achaemenid Empire had, famously, allowed conquered peoples to maintain their religious practices. Cyrus the Great had even issued a decree permitting the Jewish exiles to return to their homeland and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. Some went back. Many did not. The ones who stayed built lives. They traded, served in administrative roles, raised families, maintained their traditions in private while navigating a public world organized around entirely different values. But integration is not the same as safety, and acceptance is not the same as belonging. The distance between tolerated guest and targeted enemy, as Jewish communities living inside powerful empires had already learned more than once, could close faster than anyone expected. Mordecai knew this. He did not teach Esther to hide her identity because he was ashamed of it. He taught her to hide it because he understood something specific about information and danger. In this particular world, at this particular moment, who she came from was dangerous knowledge, and dangerous knowledge should be controlled carefully by the people who carry it. So Hadassah became Esther. The name Esther may come from the Old Persian word for star. It may be connected to Ishtar, the Babylonian goddess. Scholars have debated both possibilities for centuries without settling the question, and the text itself does not explain the choice. What is clear is the effect. The name sounds Persian. It fits the world of the palace. It belongs here in a way that Hadassah does not. She is carrying two names the way she is carrying two identities. One for the inside, one for the outside. One that tells the truth and one that keeps her safe. This is not hypocrisy. This is architecture. This is what it actually looks like to build a life in a space that was not designed for you. You learn to read a room. You learn to show people what they need to see. You learn to be present without being fully known, to perform belonging without ever fully arriving, to hold the truest part of yourself in a place where the hands of people who would use it against you cannot reach. Esther has been doing this her entire life, and when the king's search reaches Susa and she is brought into the palace, she does it again, more completely than she has ever done it before. She is placed in the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch who oversees the women. The text says, she pleased him and won his favor immediately. He gives her the best place in the harem, provides her with 7 chosen attendants, advances her ahead of the others. Esther did not manufacture this outcome through beauty alone. She read Haggai the way she has learned to read every room she has ever walked into, understood what he responded to, and became that. She applied, in this new environment, the same intelligence she had been developing her whole life. 12 months of preparation pass. Each woman goes to the king in turn. Esther, when her time comes, takes only what Haggai advises. She does not try to distinguish herself through what she brings or wears. She trusts the man who has watched every other woman go through this process. Because knowing whose advice to follow and when to follow it is also a skill she has spent years developing. The king loves Esther more than all the other women. She wins grace and favor in his sight above all the young women. He sets the royal crown on her head and makes her queen instead of Vashti. He throws a feast in her honor. He calls it Esther's feast. He is celebrating the woman he has chosen. He does not know her real name. He does not know her family. He does not know that the woman wearing the crown he just placed on her head has been carrying a different identity underneath the one he fell in love with. That the person he chose is real and present and genuine, and also not completely the person sitting across from him. Hadassah is still there. She is simply not visible. That concealment will keep her alive for years. It will protect her through every moment in the palace where the information of who she actually is could be used against her. It will function exactly as Mordecai designed it to function, right up until the moment when the same concealment that protected her becomes the thing that makes everyone she came from vulnerable. That moment is coming. It is not here yet. For now, the crown is on her head, and the feast is in her name, and the most powerful man in the world has chosen her above everyone else. He just has no idea who he chose. There is a specific kind of blindness that power produces in the people who hold it. It is not the blindness of stupidity. It is not even the blindness of arrogance, though arrogance often accompanies it. It is the blindness of a system that has been built, over years and generations, to show the person at the top exactly what that person needs to see in order to keep functioning as the person at the top. Everything gets filtered. Everything gets curated. Information moves upward through layers of advisors and officials and attendants, each layer making small adjustments to what is passed along. Each layer removing the friction and the complexity and the inconvenient truth that would require the person at the top to do something difficult. By the time reality reaches the throne, it has been shaped into something the throne can use, which is another way of saying it has been shaped into something that is no longer entirely real. The king chose Esther because she was beautiful and because she won favor in the eyes of everyone who saw her. Both of those things are true. She was genuinely present in those encounters. She brought warmth and intelligence and the particular quality of attention that makes the person in front of you feel like the most important person in the room. None of that was false. But Hadassah was not in the room, and the king did not know to look for her. This is the central irony of the entire book of Esther. And it is worth holding longer than most tellings allow, because it is not just a personal irony about one man and one woman. It is a structural description of how this empire actually works. The same king who crowned Esther without knowing who she was will later sign a decree to kill an entire people without asking which people. He will listen to a carefully framed proposal from a trusted official and act on it without requesting evidence or asking questions or pausing to consider what he is actually authorizing. He will receive the managed version of reality that his system delivers to him and respond to it as if it were the full picture. He is not a villain in this story. He is something more specific and in some ways more interesting. He is a man of genuine power who governs almost entirely through surfaces. He responds to what is presented to him. He acts on what he is shown, and because the machinery around him has been designed to show him what it needs him to see, he repeatedly makes consequential decisions based on incomplete information, without knowing that the information is incomplete. The palace does not run on truth. It runs on presentation. This is not a flaw unique to Xerxes. It is structural. Every person in this story has learned to operate within a system that rewards the careful management of appearances. Esther has survived by mastering that skill. Mordecai has survived by sitting at the boundary of the system, close enough to see how it works without being fully consumed by it. Haman, when he arrives, will understand the system better than almost anyone and use that understanding with devastating precision. And the king, at the center of all of it, remains the least informed person in his own palace. After the coronation feast, after the 7 days of celebration in Esther's name, life in the palace settles into its rhythms. Mordecai sits at the king's gate every day. This is where the text locates him. Repeatedly, as if the location matters. Not inside the palace. Not back in the Jewish quarter of Susa. At the gate, the threshold where two worlds meet without fully merging, close enough to the palace to receive information, far enough outside it to see clearly what the people inside cannot see. And one day at that gate, he overhears something that should not be overheard. Two of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, who guard the threshold of the palace, are angry at the king. They are planning something. The text does not tell us the details of how Mordecai learned what they were planning or exactly what the plan involved. It simply tells us that he found out and that he told Esther and that Esther told the king in Mordecai's name. The plot is investigated. The two men are found guilty. They are executed. And the event is recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. Mordecai receives nothing. No title, no reward, no acknowledgement in the throne room, no public recognition of the fact that this man, sitting every day at the gate, just saved the life of the person whose ring commands the largest empire on earth. The court records the act and moves forward. The man who saved the king's life goes back to sitting at the gate. This moment sits in the text like something placed there carefully and left to wait. It seems minor. It reads like a footnote in a story that has larger things ahead of it. But the book of Esther does not waste details. The debt that goes unacknowledged here is being preserved in the archives of the empire for a reason. There will come a night, much later in the story, when a king cannot sleep and calls for his records to be read aloud in the dark, and a reader opens the Chronicles to a particular passage. That night has not arrived yet. Right now there is only the record. A man saved the king. No one noticed. The debt sits in the archives, unpaid, waiting for the moment when the machinery of the story needs it. Everything is about to change. Because into this palace, into this world of surfaces and managed presentations and carefully curated information, a man is about to be elevated to a position of extraordinary power. A man who understands the system better than almost anyone alive. A man who knows exactly how to use the machinery of this empire to convert a personal grievance into imperial policy. His name is Haman, and the quiet that has settled over the palace since Esther's coronation is about to end. At some point while reading the book of Esther, if you are paying close attention, you notice something strange. You keep waiting for something and it does not come. In Genesis, God speaks and the world appears. In Exodus, God shows up in fire and cloud, parts the sea, delivers commandments from a mountain. In the Psalms, God is addressed directly in grief and rage and gratitude. In Isaiah, God fills the temple with smoke and the seraphim cover their faces and cry, "Holy." In virtually every other book of the Hebrew Bible, God is present as a voice, as an actor, as a force that enters the story and makes itself known. In Esther, the name of God does not appear once, not in the crisis, not in the fasting, not in the reversal, not in the victory, not even in the establishment of the festival that will commemorate these events for thousands of years. Every significant character in the story is named: the king, the queen, the villain, the cousin, the eunuchs, the wise men, the provinces, the cities. The name of God is nowhere. This was noticed very early. Later rabbinic discussions reveal that Esther's status as sacred scripture was not obvious to everyone. The absence of explicit divine name, the lack of public miracle, the strange carnival character of the festival it establishes. These made Esther a book that required careful interpretation before it could be fully accepted. The concern was real. How do you call a text sacred when it does not mention the sacred? The debate was resolved. The book was kept. But the question was not resolved by its inclusion. It was preserved inside it. The Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, produced by Jewish scholars in Alexandria over several centuries before the Common Era, adds material to the book of Esther that does not appear in the original Hebrew. Specifically, it adds prayers. A long prayer of Mordecai, a long prayer of Esther, direct address to God, explicit theological framing. The divine presence is made visible and legible. The gap is filled. Those additions tell you everything you need to know about how uncomfortable the original silence made people. Uncomfortable enough to write their way out of it. But the Hebrew text does not fill the gap. The Hebrew text holds the silence completely. And the question is why? One answer is that this is a diaspora story in the most specific sense. It is not set in the land of Israel, where the temple stood and the presence of God was understood to be localized and openly invoked. It is set in Persia, where Jewish communities survived by navigating a world organized around entirely different values, where faith was maintained in private while public life operated according to the rhythms of an empire that had never heard of the God of Israel. In this reading, the absence of God's name from the text mirrors the experience of the people the text is describing. Not an absence of God from their lives, an absence of the kind of visible, announced, unambiguous divine intervention that the stories set in the land could accommodate. Life in the diaspora required learning to recognize something different, something quieter, something that looked, from the outside, like ordinary events happening in ordinary sequence. There is another layer that the Jewish tradition has preserved across many centuries. Some readers of the original Hebrew text have found 4 places where the first letters of 4 consecutive words, read together, form the divine name, the name that observant Jews do not speak aloud. These patterns appear at structurally significant moments in the narrative, and some Jewish interpreters have long read them as intentional literary devices. The author's way of hiding the divine name in the text, the same way the divine presence appears to be hidden in the events. Others read them as devotional observations developed by later readers who found the silence unbearable and went looking for the name in the only place it might be. Whether you find that argument convincing or not, it fits the atmosphere of the book. The divine name is not announced on the surface, but readers across centuries have kept sensing something underneath it, something present but not visible, something that the text seems to be pointing toward without ever arriving at directly. There is a concept in Jewish thought called Hester Panim, the hiding of the face. The idea that there are seasons in history when God does not show up as fire or thunder or a parted sea, when the divine presence operates inside events without being announced in them, when the only evidence that something more than chance is at work is the pattern that becomes visible when you step back far enough to see the full shape of what happened. The Hebrew word for hiding is Hester. It sounds like the name Esther. Whether that is coincidence or design is a question the text does not answer. But the tradition has consistently found in the similarity a connection between the woman and the concept. The hidden one lives in the book of the hidden God, and what she will eventually choose to do, stepping out of hiding at the moment when hiding is no longer enough, will echo the same movement the book seems to be describing at a level deeper than the politics of any single empire. What the text gives us, instead of divine speech or appearance, is a chain of events that are each individually explainable without reference to anything supernatural. A king cannot sleep. It happens to people. A reader opens a record book to a particular page. It happens. A man arrives at a palace at exactly the wrong moment and is misread by the king. It happens. A woman times a request with precision that turns out to be exactly right. Each event, standing alone, is ordinary. But trace the chain from beginning to end, from a forgotten act of loyalty recorded in an archive, to a sleepless night, to a morning of unexpected reversal, to the complete undoing of everything a powerful man built. Follow the sequence, and notice how precisely each piece falls into the space the story had waiting for it. The timing is too exact. The reversals are too complete. The pieces fit together with a precision that simple probability struggles to account for. The Book of Esther does not tell you what to make of that. It shows you the chain and leaves the interpretation entirely to you, which may be the most honest thing a book about hiddenness could do. It does not prove the presence of God by naming him. It arranges the evidence and asks whether you can see a pattern in it. It makes the same demand on its readers that the experience of living in the diaspora made on the people the book is describing. Look carefully. Pay close attention. The thing you are looking for may not announce itself, but that does not mean it is not there. The name is hidden in the text. Whether it is hidden in the events is the question the book is asking you to sit with. Most tellings of Esther treat Mordecai as a supporting character. He is the wise older cousin, the one who gives good advice at the right moment, the one who sends the message that changes everything. He exists, in most versions of this story, primarily to make Esther's decision possible. He is the setup for her courage. That reading misses him entirely. Picture Mordecai at the king's gate. Every day, the text repeats this detail with the regularity of something that is meant to be noticed. Not inside the palace, where the power is held and the decisions are made. Not back in the Jewish quarter of Susa, where the community gathers and the traditions are maintained. At the gate, the threshold, the exact point where two worlds touch without fully merging. The king's gate in Susa was not a threshold in the purely physical sense. It was where the city's administrative and civic life happened. Officials received petitions there. Legal matters were heard there. Information moved through it the way water moves through the narrowest point of a channel. Concentrated and fast. To sit at the king's gate every day was to occupy a position of extraordinary access without any of the formal authority that such access usually required. Mordecai is a Jew from the tribe of Benjamin. His family was taken from Jerusalem in the exile. He was born in Persia. He knows this empire from the inside. He knows its language and its customs and its particular logic well enough to sit at the gate of its most important palace without being removed. And yet he is not Persian. He has not disappeared into the empire the way complete assimilation would require. He is something the ancient world did not have a clean category for. A person who belongs fully to two worlds and completely to neither. That position, which sounds like disadvantage, turns out to be the most valuable vantage point in the story. Mordecai sees what people fully inside the palace cannot see. He hears what moves through the gate, which is where real information lives, rather than in the throne room where everything is performed. He understands the system well enough to read it clearly, but is not so embedded in it that he mistakes the system's logic for truth. This is why he is the first person to learn about the assassination plot. Two of the king's guards, Bigthan and Teresh, are angry at the king. They are planning something. Mordecai finds out, passes the information to Esther, and Esther delivers it to the king in Mordecai's name. The guards are investigated, found guilty, and executed. The event is written into the official chronicles. Nothing is done for Mordecai, the man who saved the king's life. The record shows it clearly, and the court moved forward as if the debt did not exist. He goes back to sitting at the gate, the acknowledgement never coming, the favor never returned, the obligation preserved in the archives and nowhere else. Now the king elevates Haman the Agagite above all the other officials and commands everyone at the gate to bow when Haman passes. Every person at the gate goes down, except Mordecai. The other servants notice and ask him about it day after day. Why do you not bow? And Mordecai tells them he is a Jew. This has been debated across centuries of serious scholarship. The Torah does not prohibit bowing to human authorities in contexts that do not involve worship. Jewish figures bow to kings and officials throughout the Hebrew scriptures without theological crisis. So what is actually driving this? Some readers point to the specific genealogy the text provides. Haman is identified as an Agagite, a descendant of Agag who was king of the Amalekites, the ancient enemy of Israel. Mordecai is from the tribe of Benjamin, the same tribe as Saul. The king commanded to destroy Amalek completely, who failed to finish it, who spared Agag the king. The text seems to invite this echo, even if it does not stop to explain it. A Benjaminite refusing to bow to an Agagite carries weight that reaches back through centuries of unresolved conflict. Other readers find a simpler and more human explanation. Mordecai is a Jew. There is something in him, something that has survived generations of diaspora and accommodation and strategic invisibility, that will not bend to this particular man. In a world where Esther has survived by being strategically invisible, where the entire Jewish community has learned to navigate by knowing when to stay quiet and when to speak, Mordecai's refusal is the one act of visible resistance, the one place where he plants his feet in the ground of who he actually is and says, "Not this, not for this man, not today." The text gives us the act and leaves the reasoning in the silence between those two possibilities. What it does tell us is what Haman does with the refusal. He notices Mordecai. He learns who Mordecai's people are. And then his mind makes a move that tells you everything about the specific kind of danger he represents. He does not go after Mordecai. He does not have the individual man punished for a specific violation. He decides to destroy all the Jews throughout the entire kingdom of Ahasuerus. One man, one refusal, one wounded ego, and the response is the elimination of an entire people. This is the move from personal offense to systemic targeting. From this man to this category. From "I cannot tolerate this individual" to the entire group he belongs to must be destroyed. It is not an irrational escalation if you understand what drives it. Haman's need for recognition is not just personal. It is total. He needs the whole world to arrange itself around his status. One person who refuses to do that is not just an inconvenience. That one person is evidence that the total recognition Haman requires can never actually be achieved. Because there will always be someone who does not bow. The way to solve that problem, in his logic, is to eliminate the category of person who refuses. Mordecai is still at the gate when this decision is made. He does not yet know what his act has set in motion. He knows Haman is angry. He does not know that a man is already calculating how to convert that anger into the language of imperial administration. He will find out very soon. And the bridge he has spent his life maintaining, close enough to power to reach Esther, grounded enough in his own identity to remain himself inside a system designed to absorb him, will be the only structure strong enough to carry the weight of what is about to cross it. Picture the morning after Haman's elevation. He walks through the king's gate. Every person at the gate goes down. Not a polite nod or a deferential tilt of the head, but the kind of full prostration the ancient world used to signal the absolute gap in status between the person on the ground and the person still standing. Every person at the gate goes down when Haman passes. He does not rush through. A man who needs recognition the way Haman needs it does not hurry past the moment he has been waiting for. He walks slowly enough to feel every bowing body, to absorb the confirmation of what he has always understood about himself. The king has elevated him. The king has commanded the bowing. And the bowing is happening. The world is doing what it is supposed to do. Then his eye finds Mordecai. Mordecai is sitting there, upright, still, not making a scene, not issuing a protest, not even looking at Haman with defiance, just sitting the way he always sits, as if the command does not apply to him, as if Haman's elevation has not changed the fundamental arrangement of the world. One person, in a gate full of people who are all doing what they were told. For a man like Haman, this is not a minor irritation. This is not the kind of thing that a secure person would register as significant. A man who is genuinely confident in his position does not need every person in every room to confirm that position. He already knows what he is. But Haman does not know what he is in that way. Haman knows what he is, only through the reflection he sees in the people around him. His sense of himself is constructed entirely from the outside in. He is as powerful as the number of people who treat him as powerful. He is as significant as the acknowledgement he receives. Which means that one person who withholds that acknowledgement is not just an inconvenience. One person who will not bow is a crack in the mirror he needs to see himself in. Every morning he passes through that gate. Every morning Mordecai does not bow. and every morning the crack is still there. He is filled with fury. The text says this plainly. But notice what he does with the fury. He does not confront Mordecai directly. He does not go to the king and have Mordecai punished for a specific violation. He does not deal with the individual man who offended him. Instead, he learns who Mordecai's people are, and his mind moves from the particular to the general, from this man to this category, from one person who will not bow to the entire people who produced that person. He disdained. The text says, to lay hands on Mordecai alone. He disdained it. The word carries a sense of contempt for the smallness of it. Killing one man is beneath the scale of what Haman is feeling. His wound is too large for that kind of remedy. What he needs is something proportionate to the size of the injury. And the injury, in his mind, is not just one man's stubbornness. It is the existence of a people whose entire identity includes the capacity to refuse. So he goes to the king. Watch how carefully he frames the proposal. He does not say, there is a man at your gate who will not bow to me, and I want him punished. He says, there is a certain people scattered throughout the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of every other people. They do not keep the king's laws. It is not in the king's interest to tolerate them. Let a decree be issued for their destruction, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury. Every word is chosen. There is no mention of Mordecai. There is no mention of the gate, or the bowing, or the personal slight. There is only the language of imperial administration, a problem of governance, a people who do not follow the king's laws, a cost-benefit calculation that comes out cleanly in favor of elimination. He has taken something that is entirely about his ego and translated it into something that sounds like statecraft. The king does not ask which people. He does not request evidence of the laws being violated. He does not ask for names or numbers or examples of the specific harm this unnamed group has caused. He takes the ring off his finger and gives it to Haman. Do with them as you see fit. One ring, no question. An entire people. The scribes are summoned. The decree is dictated. It goes out to every province in every language. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, every person in the empire is authorized to destroy, kill, and annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children, in a single day, and to plunder their goods. This is the mechanism that makes Haman more dangerous than a man who simply acts on his own hatred. He does not need to personally kill anyone. He does not need an army loyal to him or a conspiracy of like-minded individuals. He needs one afternoon and one ring. He needs access to a system already built to carry commands to every corner of the empire, and the willingness of the man who owns that system to sign something without reading it carefully. The decree goes out. The couriers ride fast. And then the text gives us two images placed side by side. The first, the decree was issued in the citadel of Susa, and the couriers went out hurriedly by order of the king. The second, the king and Haman sat down to drink. The king and Haman sat down to drink together, while the decree they just sent out was already moving toward hundreds of communities where families were going about their days with no knowledge of what was coming. While the couriers were already on the roads, the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. The text uses a word that describes a particular kind of disoriented bewilderment. The sound a city makes when the ordinary logic of daily life has been interrupted by something that does not fit any familiar category. People in Susa knew their Jewish neighbors. They had traded with them for generations. Their children had grown up alongside each other. And now there was a document, official and sealed and legally binding, telling them that in 11 months those neighbors were scheduled to die. Outside the palace walls, in the city streets where the decree has arrived, a man named Mordecai tears his clothes and puts on sackcloth and ashes. He goes into the streets crying out with a loud and bitter cry. He comes to the entrance of the king's gate, which is as far as the law permits a man in sackcloth to go. He stands at the threshold he has occupied his whole adult life. The line between the world where the decree was written and the world where it is landing. He stands there in grief and protest and the particular posture of a person who does not yet know what to do, but refuses, even now, to sit down quietly. Inside the palace, Esther hears that something is wrong. She sends clean clothes to replace the sackcloth. He sends them back. She does not know about the decree yet. She is about to find out. Before we follow Esther into the decision that will define the rest of her life, we need to stay with the decree itself. Not as a plot development, as a document. It has a mechanism. It has a date. It has a specific logic. And understanding that logic is the only way to fully understand what Esther is being asked to walk into and what the people outside the palace are now living inside. Haman did not choose the date randomly. The text tells us that in the first month, Haman cast Pur. The word means lot. He threw lots from day to day and from month to month until the lot fell on the 12th month. The month of Adar. Pur. This single word is where the name of the festival Purim eventually comes from. And the detail is worth pausing on because of what it reveals about Haman and about the larger shape of the story. Haman is using a randomizing mechanism, the ancient equivalent of throwing dice, to find the most favorable day for the destruction of an entire people. He is consulting chance to determine when to act. He is placing his plan inside the logic of fate, as if the lot will reveal something beyond his own calculation, as if destiny itself will cooperate with what he has decided to do. The lot falls on the 12th month. It is currently the first month. 11 months separate the signing of the decree from its execution. 11 months is a long time to live under a death sentence. It is long enough for every Jewish community in the empire to receive the decree and understand precisely what it means. Long enough for the calendar to become a source of terror. Each passing day bringing the appointed date one step closer. Each morning a reminder that the distance between now and the 13th of Adar is shrinking. Long enough for communities to fracture under the pressure, for individuals to make desperate choices, for fear to do its full, slow work on an entire population. But 11 months is also long enough for things to change. Long enough for a forgotten debt in the royal archives to become relevant. Long enough for a sleepless night to occur at exactly the right moment. Long enough for a queen who has not yet decided what to do to make her decision and act on it before the mechanism activates. The lot that Haman cast to find the most favorable day for destruction also created, without his knowing it, the window of time in which the destruction could be prevented. This is the first of several moments in the story where the tools of the enemy turn against their builder. It will not be the last. Now look at how the decree actually functions. Because the mechanism matters. Haman does not ask the king to deploy the army. He does not propose a government-organized military operation that would require logistics and coordination and the kind of visible, official violence that would be recorded in the chronicles as something the king personally ordered. He proposes something far more efficient and far more terrible. He distributes the killing to ordinary people. Any person in the empire, on the 13th of Adar, is authorized to destroy, kill, and annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children, in a single day, and to plunder their goods. The property incentive is built directly into the authorization. You do not just have permission to kill, you have permission to profit from it. The goods of the people you kill become yours by law. This structure removes the killing from the center of imperial power and distributes it across an entire population. It does not require a standing army or central coordination or any mechanism more complicated than a date and a ring and a courier system. The government does not need to create the conditions for violence. It simply needs to license whatever conditions already exist. Whatever hostility or greed or fear lives in ordinary people becomes, on the appointed day, legally actionable. Haman understood this. He needed only one afternoon and one ring. He was right. Now look at what the decree produces across the empire. Jewish communities receive the same news on the same day. There is no gradual escalation, no period during which the threat remains ambiguous or distant, no opportunity for people to convince themselves that the rumors are exaggerated or that surely it will not reach their particular city. One morning the decree does not exist. The next morning it is imperial law, sealed with the king's ring, carrying the full authority of the most powerful government on earth. The text says there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting and weeping and lamenting, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. This is not the language of people making a political response to a political development. This is the language of grief, of communities absorbing news that falls outside any category they have available for processing it. Their neighbors received the same decree. Their officials received the same decree. The entire apparatus of the empire around them has been pointed at them, officially and legally, and there is nowhere to appeal. In Susa specifically, Mordecai goes into the city streets in sackcloth, crying out loudly. He comes to the entrance of the king's gate and stops. Sackcloth is not permitted inside the palace walls. He stands at the threshold where he has always stood, between the world of power and the world of ordinary people, and he stands there in the full visibility of public grief. Esther's attendants come and tell her about Mordecai. She sends him clothing to replace the sackcloth. He refuses it. She sends Hathach, one of the eunuchs appointed to attend her, to find Mordecai and learn what this is and why. Mordecai tells Hathach everything, the exact amount of silver Haman offered the king, the text of the decree. He gives Hathach a copy of the written decree itself and tells him to show it to Esther, and to charge her to go to the king, to beg his favor and plead with him on behalf of her people. Her people. The phrase carries everything. Hathach carries the decree and the message back into the palace. He places them in Esther's hands. She reads the date. She reads the authorization. She reads the scope of it, the words that describe the target of the decree. Young and old, women and children, every province, every city. The name the document gives to the people scheduled for destruction. The same name Mordecai told the servants at the gate when they asked him why he would not bow. The same name she has been keeping hidden since the day she first walked through the palace gates. She sends her answer back to Mordecai. And what she says is not a refusal and not cowardice. It is the accurate assessment of a person who understands the specific constraints of the system she is operating inside. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law: to be put to death. The only exception is if the king holds out the golden scepter, and the king has not called me to come to him in 30 days. 30 days without a summons. In the context of a royal court, this is significant. She is not currently at the center of the king's attention. The personal favor she would be relying on has not been recently confirmed. She is giving Mordecai accurate information about the risk, which is what an intelligent person who understands the stakes does when asked to walk into a situation that could kill her. She is not saying no. She is saying, here is what you are asking me to walk into. Here is the actual risk. Here is what I know from where I am standing. The message goes back to Mordecai, and what comes back to her is the reply that will stay with her long after the decree and the palace and the empire itself are gone. Mordecai's reply comes back through Hathach in 3 sentences. 3 sentences that contain, between them, everything Esther has been trying not to think about since the day she first walked into this palace. Do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? No comfort, no strategy, no guarantee about how this ends. Start with the first sentence. because it is the one most people rush past on their way to the famous third one. And it is the most important thing, Mordecai says. Do not think you will escape in the palace. This sentence is doing something precise. It is naming an assumption that Esther has not stated out loud, but that Mordecai can see operating underneath her response. When she explained the law about entering the inner court uninvited, she was giving him accurate information about real constraints. But underneath the accurate information was a structure of thought that had been keeping her functional inside this palace for years. The palace is different. What happens to people outside it does not fully reach inside. I have arranged my life carefully enough, hidden my identity successfully enough, managed my presentation thoroughly enough, that the dangers threatening other people do not threaten me in the same way. This is not a uniquely human failure of imagination. It is an almost universal one. When a survival strategy has worked long enough, when it has kept you safe through enough difficult moments, you begin to confuse the strategy with actual safety. The thing that has been protecting you stops feeling like a tool you are using and starts feeling like a permanent condition of the world. Esther's strategy was her invisibility. Her Jewish identity was unknown inside the palace. The decree moving toward every province at this moment did not know she existed. As long as no one inside these walls connected Esther the queen to Hadassah, the Jewish girl from the tribe of Benjamin, the machinery pointed at the 13th of Adar would not reach her. Mordecai destroys this logic in one sentence. The decree is not looking for Jewish people who have managed their image carefully inside the palace. It is looking for Jewish people. The identity Esther has kept hidden all these years is hidden from the humans around her. It is not hidden from the parchment. On the 13th of Adar, the mechanism activates, and the royal crown on Esther's head does not interrupt it. Do not think you will escape. He is not being cruel. He is removing the last comfortable misreading of a situation that has no comfortable readings. He is handing her the full weight of what is actually happening and asking her to hold it without the cushion of the assumption that has been softening it. Now the second sentence. If you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. This sentence is stranger than it appears on first reading. Stay with it. Mordecai is not saying that if Esther does nothing, everyone dies and it will be her fault. He is saying something more specific and more theologically loaded than that. He is saying the survival of the Jewish people is not contingent on Esther's decision. The deliverance is coming. Something will shift. Some other path will open. Some other instrument will be found. But Esther will not be on it. That is a remarkable thing to say in the middle of a crisis. He is removing the pressure of the outcome from her shoulders. He is not saying you are the only one who can save them, which would be a different kind of manipulation. He is saying the story will continue without you if you choose not to be part of it. What he is leaving her with is not the weight of the result, but the weight of the choice. She is not being asked to guarantee an outcome she cannot guarantee. She is being asked to decide what kind of person she is going to be inside a situation that is already in motion. And then the third sentence. Who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Most people who know this line carry it as a declaration of destiny, as if Mordecai is telling Esther that her presence in the palace was divinely arranged for this specific purpose, that the whole trajectory of her life was a plan being executed from above, and this is the moment the plan reveals itself. That is not what the sentence says. Who knows? 2 words. A genuine question. An honest acknowledgement of uncertainty from a man who does not have the answer and is not pretending otherwise. He is not telling her what she was made for. He is asking her to look at the chain of events that placed her exactly here, in this palace, in this position, with this access, at this moment, and to ask herself whether any of it might be more than coincidence. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? The question is the point, because a question requires an answer, and the only person who can answer it is the person being asked. Esther receives the message. She sits with the decree in her hands and the 3 sentences from the man who raised her, each one dismantling a different layer of the protection she has built around herself. The first removes the illusion that the palace is separate from what is happening outside it. The second removes the illusion that she is indispensable to the outcome. The third removes the illusion that her being here is simply a matter of chance with no claim on her. She sits with all of it, and then she sends her answer back. Go and gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf. Do not eat or drink for 3 days. Night or day, I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. 4 words in Hebrew. The entire decision compressed into a sentence that does not reach for comfort or certainty or any guarantee about what comes next. She might die doing this. She is going to do it anyway. This is courage of a very specific kind. Not the courage of someone who is not afraid. Not the courage of someone who has been given a vision of how the story ends. The courage of someone who has done the honest calculation, who has looked at the alternative, who has seen what it would mean to remain hidden while the people she came from are killed on a date circled on a calendar, and who has found that she cannot choose that. Not because it is safe to choose otherwise, because she cannot live inside the choice that is safe. Mordecai was right about the palace not protecting her, and Esther already knew it. She had been knowing it for some time. In the quiet part of herself, where the performance of Esther and the reality of Hadassah were never entirely reconciled. She had just needed someone to say it out loud. The fast begins. Mordecai goes and does everything Esther commanded him. And in the palace, in the 3 days of silence that follow, something happens that the text will not describe and that we will not have access to. We will only see its result. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes. There are sentences that do not stay where they were spoken. They get said once, in a specific moment, by a specific person, in response to a specific crisis, and then they outlive the moment. They travel forward through time, repeated in different rooms, applied to circumstances the speaker never imagined, printed on walls and spoken at commencement ceremonies and whispered in hospital rooms where people need language larger than what ordinary speech provides. Who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Most people who know this sentence carry it as a declaration, as destiny language, as the kind of thing you say when you want someone to understand that their presence in a difficult situation was not accidental, that something larger than coincidence placed them exactly where they are, that the hard thing being asked of them is not a burden but a purpose. That reading is not entirely wrong, but it is not what the sentence actually says. Mordecai says, "Who knows?" Not God has placed you here for this reason. Not I know exactly why you are in the palace, and this moment is the fulfillment of that plan. Who knows? A genuine question. An honest acknowledgement of uncertainty from a man who does not have the answer any more than Esther does. He is not delivering a theological declaration. He is asking a theological question. He is saying, look at the chain of events that placed you here. Look at where you are and what is being asked of you, and the improbable sequence of things that would have had to happen for you to be in this position at this moment. Ask yourself whether any of that might be more than coincidence. Who knows? The uncertainty is not a weakness in the argument. It is the honest center of it. And in the context of a book that does not name God once, a book where the divine presence, if it is operating at all, is hidden inside what looks like ordinary events. This is the only way to make the claim honestly. Not I know God arranged this, but look at the shape of what has happened, and ask yourself what you make of it. Now look at what surrounds the sentence, because sentences do not exist in isolation, and the ones on either side of this one change what it means. Before it, if you keep silent, you and your father's house will perish. After it, nothing. The message ends. No promise, no assurance, no word about what will happen if she does go. Just the question. hanging in the air, followed by silence. She is not being given a guarantee. She is being given a question and the dignity of choosing her own answer. So look at her response. Because the most important sentence in this part of the story is not the one Mordecai sends. It is the 4 words Esther sends back. She does not say, "You are right. I see now that this is my destiny." She does not say, "I trust that God will protect me." She does not reach for any of the comfortable framings that would make this moment tidier or safer to inhabit. She says, "I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. If I perish, I perish." In Hebrew, the construction carries a weight that most English translations cannot fully render. There is a sense in which the loss has already been absorbed. Not resigned to, not accepted with peace, but moved through. She has walked into the territory of the worst possible outcome and come out the other side of it, still pointed toward the door. The fear is real. The risk is real. The possibility that this ends badly is something she has not pretended away. And she has decided that none of those real things change what she needs to do. This is a particular kind of courage. Not the courage of the person who is not afraid. Not the courage of the person who has been shown how the story ends. The courage of a person who is afraid and who goes anyway. Not because the fear has been resolved, but because something else has been settled that the fear cannot reach. She does not ask for a plan. She does not ask Mordecai to find a legal workaround or identify a safer approach or create conditions under which the walk to the throne room will be less dangerous. She asks for something different. She asks for the community to fast with her. Go and gather all the Jews to be found in Susa. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Fasting in the Hebrew tradition is not primarily about self-denial as an end in itself. It is about stripping away the ordinary supports of daily life, making yourself small and quiet enough to hear or feel or receive something that the noise of ordinary living drowns out. It is the physical posture of a person who knows they are not sufficient to what they are being asked to do, and who is honest enough about that insufficiency to stop pretending otherwise. Esther is not asking to be made braver. She is not asking to be shown the outcome. She is asking to carry this weight alongside the people who are carrying the same thing. She is asking to enter the 3 days of silence, not alone but in community. Her insufficiency held alongside theirs. The shared smallness of it acknowledged, before she walks into the thing that is too large for any of them individually. This is its own kind of faith. Not faith expressed as certainty. Faith expressed as the recognition that she cannot do this alone, and that the right response to that recognition is not to find a way to make herself sufficient, but to bring her insufficiency honestly into community with others. The fast begins. Mordecai goes and does everything Esther commanded him. 3 days. No food. No water. The Jewish community of Susa holds it with her. Her young women hold it with her. Whatever is going to be decided in those 72 hours. Whatever is being formed or resolved or let go in the hunger and the stillness. The text does not give us access to it. The book of Esther, which has been precise about palace dimensions and feast inventories and the exact height of a gallows, goes almost entirely silent about what happens inside Esther during the 3 days before she acts. This silence is a choice, and it matters. The Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures adds a long prayer for Esther during this period. It is theologically rich, full of direct address to God, full of explicit faith language that resolves the silence and makes the divine presence legible. The gap is filled in completely. The Hebrew text does not fill it. The Hebrew text holds the 3 days empty of reportable content and asks you to stay in that emptiness with her. Because that emptiness is where the actual work happens. Not the work that can be observed or recorded or quoted, but the work that a person does in the part of themselves where no one else has access. The reckoning with what is real. The moving through the territory of the worst possible outcome, The arriving at something that cannot be manufactured by external means and that the text respects enough not to try to explain. We will only know what she arrives at by watching what she does next. On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes. She did not dress in mourning clothes or sackcloth. She did not present herself as a supplicant hoping to move the king with visible distress. She dressed in the full visual language of who she is in this palace. She put on everything that the role of queen requires when a queen enters a room. She took all of it. The title and the robes and the crown and the years of carefully maintained favor and the relationship she built with a king who chose her above everyone else. And she prepared to use all of it for the one thing the palace never designed it to serve. There is something in that choice of clothing that goes deeper than strategy. She is not disguising herself to get through the door. She is bringing everything she has built inside this palace and pointing it toward what she came from. Esther, fully present, in service of Hadassah, the performance and the person, for the first time, walking through the same door together. If I perish, I perish. She goes. The text gives us 3 days and almost nothing to fill them with. No record of what Esther said during those 72 hours. No prayer written down in her name in the original Hebrew. No conversation with her women that we are shown. No message sent to Mordecai. No visible evidence of what she was working through or what she was arriving at. The book of Esther, which has been precise about palace dimensions and feast inventories and the exact height of a gallows, goes almost entirely silent about the 3 days that produce the most important decision in the story. This silence is a choice. The Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures adds a long prayer for Esther during this period. It is theologically rich, full of direct address to God, full of explicit faith language that fills the silence and makes the divine presence legible and unambiguous. Esther prays. The words are recorded. The gap is resolved. But the Hebrew text does not resolve it. The Hebrew text holds the 3 days empty and asks you to sit inside that emptiness. So let us sit inside it. Think about what Esther was holding in those 3 days. She was holding the decree. Not a second-hand description of it, but the actual document. The written authorization for the killing of every Jewish man, woman, and child on a specific date. Sealed with her husband's ring. She had read the words herself. She knew what they said. She knew the date was fixed and the machinery was already in motion, and that 11 months from when Haman dictated those words to a scribe, the mechanism would activate whether or not anyone in the palace ever understood what had been set in motion. She was holding the 3 sentences from Mordecai, the first one that dismantled her last comfortable assumption about the palace, the second one that told her the rescue was coming with or without her, the third one that asked the question she could not stop turning over. She was holding the fear. She would be a fool not to be afraid. And Esther is not a fool. She understood the law about the inner court. She had watched how this palace operated for years. She knew what it did to people who stepped outside their assigned role. She had no way of knowing whether the 30 days of silence from the king meant that the favor she had built was still strong enough to survive walking through a door she had not been invited to walk through. And she was holding the sentence she had sent back to Mordecai. If I perish, I perish. She had said it. Now she had 3 days to live inside it. To find out whether the person who said those words, in the immediate shock of receiving the decree, was the same person who could say them again on the morning of the 3rd day, in cold clarity, with the door visible ahead of her. Most of us can be brave for a moment. The moment of decision, when the stakes are freshly visible and the alternative feels intolerable, can produce courage in people who did not know they had it. But the 3 days between the decision and the action are different. That is where the courage has to survive the long, quiet hours when there is nothing to distract the fear. When the voice that asks, maybe there is another way, gets louder. When the body is weakened by hunger and the mind has nothing to occupy it but the weight of what is coming. Esther fasted through those hours. No food, no water. 3 days and 3 nights. Her young women fasted alongside her. The Jewish community of Susa fasted alongside all of them. Whatever she was carrying, she was not carrying it alone. The text does not tell us what shifted during those 3 days. It does not give us the moment of resolution or the prayer that preceded the decision or the specific thing that moved in her between the woman who sent the message and the woman who put on the royal robes. It gives us only this. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes. She dressed as the queen, not in mourning clothes, not in sackcloth, not in the posture of a woman, hoping that visible distress will move the king to mercy. She put on the full presentation of who Esther of Persia is when she enters a room of consequence. She dressed in the complete visual language of the role she has occupied for years inside this palace. This detail matters more than it might seem. She is not hiding what the 3 days cost her by dressing this way. She is not performing a composure she does not feel, or covering a grief that has not been resolved. She is doing something more specific. She is taking everything the palace gave her. The access, and the favor, and the crown, and the years of careful performance. And she is pointing all of it toward the one thing the palace never intended it to serve. She built this position inside a system designed to erase who she actually is. She is now going to use that position to fight for the people the system is trying to erase. Hadassah, in the royal robes of Esther, both of them going through the same door. She stood in the inner court of the king's palace, in front of the king's quarters, while the king was sitting on his royal throne inside the throne room opposite the entrance to the palace. The geography of it is precise and worth holding. She is visible. He can see the entrance from where he sits. She has crossed into the space where the law says she can be killed for standing. She is already past the point where turning back is a real option. The only movement available is forward. The king looks up. He sees her. The king sees Esther standing in the inner court. The text says she found favor in his eyes. This same phrase has appeared at every threshold she has crossed in this palace. When she first appeared before Haggai the eunuch, she found favor. When she first appeared before the king during the selection, she found favor above all the other women. At every doorway she has walked through inside this palace, the person on the other side has responded to her with something the text keeps calling favor. It happens again here, at the most dangerous doorway of all. He holds out the golden scepter. She is alive. The first crossing is done. She approaches and touches the top of the scepter. This is the formal gesture of receiving the extended mercy. The acknowledgement that the danger has passed and the audience is granted. Even in this moment, even after 3 days of fasting and the walk through the inner court and whatever her heart was doing in the seconds between stepping into view and watching the king reach for the scepter, she completes the ritual correctly. She knows how this palace works, and she is using that knowledge rather than abandoning it. The king asks what she wants. He offers her up to half his kingdom. Esther says if it pleases the king, "Let the king and Haman come today, to a feast I have prepared for the king." That is all. A dinner invitation. She does not ask for what she came to ask for. The decree is still in effect. Her people are still under a death sentence. The man who arranged it is standing somewhere in this palace at this very moment. And the woman who walked through a door that could have killed her to get to this audience says, "Come to dinner. Bring Haman. Tonight." The king immediately sends for Haman. They come to the feast Esther has prepared. While they are drinking wine, the king asks again, "What is your wish?" "It shall be granted." "What is your request?" "Even to half my kingdom." "It shall be fulfilled." And Esther says, "My wish and my request is this. If I have found favor in the sight of the king, let the king and Haman come to the feast that I will prepare for them. And tomorrow I will do as the king has said." A second invitation. A second delay. 2,000 years of readers have asked why. The rabbis asked why. The scholars ask why. The honest answer is that the text does not tell us. It gives us the action and leaves the reasoning in the space where her mind was working. Several things may be true at once. She may not have been ready. The courage to enter the room and the courage to speak the specific words she needed to speak in it are two different things. And there is no law that says they arrive at the same moment. 3 days of fasting, followed by a walk through a potentially fatal doorway, is its own kind of depletion. A person can do the brave thing and still need a moment before the next brave thing. She may have been reading the king. Years of careful attention to how this palace works. Years of watching the king's moods and knowing which moments are favorable and which are not. May have told her something in that room that we are not privy to. Something in his posture or his tone or the quality of his attention that said not yet. Wait. Or she may have been doing something deliberate with Haman. Because look at what Haman does with the night between the 2 feasts. He leaves the first feast happy, filled with joy and gladness of heart. The text says, he has just spent the evening at a private dinner with the 2 most powerful people in the empire. He walks out through the gate feeling exceptional, celebrated, seen in exactly the way he needs to be seen. And then he sees Mordecai, still at the gate, still not bowing. The contrast destroys him. He has just come from the table of the king and queen, and there is this one man who will not give him what 100 others just gave him without thinking. He goes home and tells his wife and friends everything. The wealth, the sons, the ways the king has honored him, the exclusive invitation from the queen, and then yet all this is worth nothing to me so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. All of it, everything, worth nothing, because of one man who will not bow. His wife and friends suggest building a gallows, 50 cubits high, roughly 75 feet. Build it tonight, and in the morning ask the king for permission to hang Mordecai on it. Then go to the feast joyfully. 50 cubits. No one builds a functional execution structure 75 feet tall. This is a monument, a public declaration visible across a large portion of the city. Haman needs the punishment of Mordecai to be seen. Because in the logic of this empire, everything important must be seen, and the humiliation of the man who would not bow must be as visible as possible to mean anything. The idea pleases Haman. He has the gallows built that night. And now look at what is happening simultaneously. In the palace, while the gallows goes up, the king cannot sleep. The text introduces this with the flat declarative simplicity it reserves for the moments that matter most. That night, sleep fled from the king. No explanation. No cause given. Just the fact of it. Placed in the narrative at precisely the location where it needs to be. The king calls for the book of memorable deeds, the chronicles, to be read aloud. The reader opens the book and begins. And the reader arrives at the passage about Mordecai and the 2 eunuchs. The assassination plot. The report delivered through Esther. The investigation. The execution of the conspirators. The king asks what honor or distinction has been given to Mordecai for this. His servants answer, nothing has been done for him. Nothing. The man who saved the king's life. Recorded. Acknowledged. Unrewarded. The debt sitting in the archives for however long it has been since the night Mordecai overheard 2 men planning something they should not have been planning. The king decides this must be corrected. In the morning he asks who is in the court. The answer is Haman, who arrived early to ask about hanging Mordecai on the gallows he built overnight. The king calls Haman in before Haman can say a word. He asks what should be done for the man the king delights to honor. Haman, certain the king is speaking about him, proposes the most elaborate public ceremony he can conceive. Royal robes. The king's own horse. A proclamation through the city square by one of the most noble officials of the empire. This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. The king says, go at once. Take the robes and the horse. Do exactly this for Mordecai the Jew who sits at the king's gate. Leave out nothing you have mentioned. Haman dresses Mordecai in royal robes. Haman leads Mordecai through the city square on the king's horse. Haman proclaims before him, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." The man who built the gallows at midnight to humiliate one person is leading that person through the streets at noon to honor him. He returns to his house with his head covered in grief. His wife and his advisors tell him something that the text records with quiet significance: "If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of the Jewish people, you will not overcome him. You will surely fall before him." They can see the shape of it, even from outside the tradition, even without any theological stake in the outcome. Haman's own household can read the pattern forming. This is not going the way it was supposed to go. Then the king's eunuchs arrive to bring Haman to the second feast. He goes, "Esther entered when she had to. She waited when she could. And the night she created between the two feasts did things that no human plan could have engineered. A sleepless king. An open chronicle. A forgotten debt remembered at the precise moment when remembering it changed everything. The table is set. The king and Haman are present. The wine is poured. The king asks for the third time what Esther wants. This time, she answers, "If it pleases the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and if the thing seems right before the king, and if I am pleasing in his eyes, let my life be granted me for my wish, and my people for my request." 4 conditional clauses. 4 times she places the weight of what she is about to ask inside the possibility of the king's favor. This is not weakness. This is Esther using every tool the palace has given her. The language of deference and favor and relationship. And pointing all of it toward the one request the palace was never designed to deliver. Then she says the sentence, "For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated." 3 things are happening in this sentence at the same time. First, the word sold. She is not framing this as an administrative matter or a policy question or an abstract concern about a community somewhere in the provinces. She is invoking the transaction. Haman paid 10,000 talents of silver to authorize this decree. Esther is telling the king directly, "A purchase was made in your throne room. What was purchased was us." The king signed something without understanding that his queen was included in the merchandise. Second, the word we. She does not say a certain people. She does not say the people of my origin or the community from which I came. She says we. She steps into the category. She places herself inside the decree rather than speaking about it from outside. Third, I and my people. My people. Not a certain people scattered among the provinces, which is how Haman described them to the king. Not the group whose laws are different from those of every other people. My people. The possessive is the whole sentence. It is the thing that everything in Esther's life up to this point has been building toward and moving away from simultaneously. She is standing in front of the king who crowned Esther, and she is introducing him to Hadassah. Stay with what this costs. She has maintained this concealment for years. Through the 12 months of preparation, through the coronation and the feast in her name. Through every morning she woke up inside this palace, knowing both names and performing only one of them. She has been carrying both identities the way you carry something fragile, with the constant low-level attention of a person who cannot afford a single moment of carelessness. And now she is setting it down. This is not the moment she is discovered. That distinction matters enormously. There is a difference between being found out and choosing to be seen. Discovered means the choice is made by someone else. The concealment fails. The secret is extracted. Choosing to be seen means the choice is yours. Made in the moment you determine is right. In the conditions you have prepared as carefully as you know how to prepare them. Esther is not cornered. She is not exposed. She has had weeks since receiving the decree to decide what to do. She has had 3 days of fasting to move through the fear. She has had 2 evenings with the king in favorable circumstances to read the moment. She is in a room where the king is disposed toward her. where she has just witnessed the complete humiliation of Haman, where the favor she has cultivated for years is present and available. She chooses this moment. She opens her hands and sets down the thing she has been protecting. My people. The king's face changes. He rises from the feast and goes into the palace garden. He needs to think. He has just learned that the queen he loves is Jewish, that the decree he signed without asking questions is a death warrant for the woman who has been sitting across from him at his own table, that the man he elevated above all other officials walked into his throne room with a carefully packaged proposal and used it, using the king's own ring, to arrange the death of his own wife's community. The king did not know. He did not know because the system he governs is designed to show him what it needs him to see. He trusted Haman's framing, the way he trusts every framing that comes to him in the language of responsible administration. And the cost of that trust is sitting across from him at dinner wearing a crown he placed on her head. Haman is still in the banquet hall. He understands in the seconds after the king walks out that harm has been determined against him. He falls onto the couch where Esther is reclining and begs for his life. When the king returns from the garden, he sees Haman on Esther's couch. He says, "Will he even assault the queen in my presence in my own house?" The charge is a misreading. Haman was begging, not assaulting. But the king's interpretation of what he sees does not need to be accurate. It needs to give him a reason to act immediately and decisively. It does that completely. One of the eunuchs speaks. He mentioned, with the timing of someone who has been waiting for exactly this moment, the gallows that Haman prepared for Mordecai, the man who spoke good on behalf of the king. It is standing at Haman's house, 50 cubits high. The king says, "Hang him on that." So they hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the wrath of the king abated. 6 words. The rage that entered this story through one man's ego at a palace gate, that moved through the machinery of empire to become a death sentence for hundreds of thousands of people, that built a monument to itself overnight and then was forced to honor the person it was meant to destroy, ends in 6 words. But the story is not over. The decree is still in effect. The king's ring sealed it. The law of Persia and Media means it cannot be revoked. Haman is dead. The mechanism he activated is still running. Esther falls at the king's feet. She is weeping. She is pleading with him to avert the evil plan of Haman and the plot against the Jews. The house of Haman has been given to her. Mordecai has been given the ring. Haman is gone, and she is still weeping, still asking, because she understands what the king is about to tell her. He tells her that a decree written in the king's name and sealed with the king's ring cannot be revoked. What he can do is authorize a second decree. He gives Esther and Mordecai the ring and tells them to write whatever seems good to them regarding the Jews. In the king's name, with the king's seal. 2 decrees now exist, both sealed with the same ring. One calling for destruction, one authorizing defense. The first cannot be undone. The second creates the conditions under which the first can be answered. The scribes come. The second decree is written. It grants Jewish communities throughout the empire the right to gather, protect their lives, and defend themselves against any armed force that comes against them. The couriers ride out on swift horses. The same courier system that carried the death warrant carries the counter-authorization to every province. In Susa there is gladness and joy. In every city where the decree arrives there is gladness and joy, a feast and a holiday. But the 13th of Adar is still on the calendar. Esther has done everything that was available to her to do. She walked through the door. She waited for the right moment. She said the words. She named who she was. The second decree is on its way to every province. The outcome of the appointed day is no longer predetermined. It is contested. That is what she walked through the door for. Not a clean ending, a fighting chance, which, in a story about a people the system was designed to erase, may be the most honest thing that could be offered. The 13th day of Adar arrives. The book of Esther does not look away from what happens on that day. It does not summarize it from a comfortable distance or find language that softens the edges of what the text actually records. A story that has been this honest about everything else owes its reader the same honesty here. On the appointed day, the Jews in every province gather. The officials and governors and royal agents throughout the empire support them. Because the fear of Mordecai has fallen on all of them, and because the second decree made the king's current position clear. In the citadel of Susa, the Jews kill 500 men. They also kill the 10 sons of Haman. In the provinces across the empire, the Jews kill 75,000 of those who came against them. 75,000. Let that number sit before anything else is said about it. The text records it with the same flat documentary tone it uses for the number of days in Xerxes' feast and the height of Haman's gallows. 75,000. It does not apologize for the number. It does not frame it as tragedy or celebrate it as triumph. It records what happened and moves on. Most tellings of Esther end before this point. They close with Haman on the gallows and Mordecai in royal robes and Esther vindicated and the city of Susa rejoicing. That ending is not wrong as far as it goes. But it stops before the story stops. And what the story actually does at the end requires the same honest engagement that the story has demanded at every other difficult point. So here is what can be said honestly. 2 decrees were in effect simultaneously on the 13th of Adar. The first, issued in Haman's name with the king's authority, authorized any person in the empire to kill Jewish men, women, and children and plunder their property. The second, issued in Mordecai and Esther's name with the same authority, authorized Jewish communities to gather, defend themselves, and attack anyone who came against them. Neither decree could be revoked. Both carried the king's seal. The result was a day when both the attack and the defense had been legally authorized. And the only thing determining the outcome in any given location was which side was stronger, more organized, and more prepared. Esther and Mordecai did not design this situation. They inherited it from a system that had no mechanism for undoing what it had done, only for layering new authorizations on top of old ones. They wrote the most protective counter-authorization the system allowed, and the system allowed a day of violence. Now look at what the text records about what the Jewish communities did and did not do on that day. 3 times. In 3 separate moments in the account of the fighting, the text says that the Jews did not lay their hands on the plunder. 3 times. In ancient narrative, repetition of this kind is never decoration. The text is making a deliberate point about the character of what happened on the 13th of Adar. The first decree authorized killing and plundering. The second decree also authorized plundering. Every person who fought that day had legal permission to take the property of those they killed. And 3 times the text records that they did not. They killed. They did not plunder. The fighting was not about property. It was about survival. The distinction between those 2 things, between people fighting to take what others have and people fighting to keep their lives, is the distinction the text insists on drawing 3 times across the account of 75,000 deaths. Now the harder questions, the ones that cannot be resolved cleanly and that the tradition has wrestled with for centuries. What do we do with the scale of it? 75,000 people. However that number is understood. However it maps onto the conventions of ancient military literature. Represents real deaths in real communities. The people who lost those 75,000 were real. Their grief was real. The text does not ask us to feel nothing about that. It records the number without cushioning it and leaves the weight of it with the reader. What do we do with the request Esther makes after the first day? The king tells her that 500 men have been killed in Susa and the 10 sons of Haman are dead. He asks what further she wants. She asks for 2 things. She asks that the Jews in Susa be allowed to continue fighting on the next day. And she asks that the 10 sons of Haman, already dead, be hanged on the gallows publicly. The sons are already dead. The public display serves no military purpose. It is a statement, and statements made in the aftermath of violence carry a weight that the violence itself does not fully account for. The text records the request without commentary. The king grants it. The bodies are hung. The text moves on. Readers have found this request difficult for centuries, and there is no resolution that makes the difficulty disappear. The honest position is to sit with it as the text sits with it, neither defended nor explained away. Present in the record, and then the 14th and 15th days of Adar become days of feasting and gladness. Mordecai and Esther write to establish these days as a permanent annual observance for every generation, every family, every province, every city. The days of Purim are not to pass away from among the Jews. Their memory is not to perish from their descendants. A death sentence became a festival. The instrument of intended destruction gave the festival its name. The community that was scheduled to be erased chose to respond to its survival with memory. Loud, annual, deliberately public memory. Not by disappearing quietly into the aftermath. Not by putting the year of the decree behind them and moving forward without looking back. By building the remembrance into the calendar, writing it into letters sent to every province, making it an obligation passed from generation to generation. What do we do with this ending? Hold it the way the text holds it, without smoothing the edges, without choosing one part to emphasize until the others disappear. The joy is real. The violence is real. The survival is real. The cost of the survival is real. The decree Haman wrote and the king signed without reading carefully produced a day of bloodshed that the second decree could not prevent. Only answer. And the community that came through that day chose neither silence nor forgetting. They chose to remember, which is itself a statement. When the world builds systems designed to erase you, and when those systems are activated by the wounded pride of one powerful man, and when the only person positioned to stop it is a woman who has spent her life hiding who she is, and when she stops hiding at exactly the right moment, and when the stopping works but costs more than anyone wanted it to cost. What do you do with the fact that you are still alive? You name the festival after the lot that was supposed to determine the day you would die, because the lot fell on a month 11 months away, and in those 11 months, everything changed. Every year, in Jewish communities around the world, the book of Esther is read aloud. The whole book, all 10 chapters, in the synagogue, at night, and again in the morning, and every time the name of Haman is spoken during the reading, the congregation makes noise. Noisemakers spin. Feet stamp. Voices rise. The name is buried in sound so completely that when the noise subsides and the reading continues, the name has been drowned. This has been happening for somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 years. That is a long time to keep making noise at the same name. Purim is named for the lot, not for Esther, who risked her life, not for Mordecai, who refused to bow, not for the deliverance, or the second decree, or the survival that the festival exists to celebrate. For the randomizing mechanism Haman used in the first month of the 12th year of Xerxes to find the most favorable day for destroying the Jewish people. The lot fell on the 12th month. 11 months later his plan was undone, and he was dead, and the people he had sentenced to destruction were alive. The festival takes the name of the enemy's tool. This is not an accident. The lot that was supposed to determine when the people would die became the name of the day they celebrate that they did not. The instrument of intended destruction is transformed, by naming, into a permanent monument to the failure of that destruction. Every time someone says the word Purim, they are saying something specific. You cast a lot against us. The lot turned around. Now look at how the festival is observed. Because the way a community chooses to remember something tells you what it understands that thing to mean. 4 obligations define Purim. the reading of the Megillah, the scroll of Esther, the giving of gifts of food to friends and neighbors, the giving of charity to the poor, and festive eating and drinking, and costumes. On Purim, people dress as other people. They wear masks. They become, for a day, someone other than themselves. Children dress as Esther and Mordecai and Haman. Adults dress as characters from the story, or characters from other stories, or no recognizable character at all. The boundaries of identity are deliberately blurred for the duration of the holiday. In a story that is entirely about hiddenness, the festival of that story is celebrated by hiding who you are. The Talmud preserves a tradition that on Purim, a person should celebrate until they cannot distinguish between blessed is Mordecai and cursed is Haman. The moral categories that normally organize experience, the clear line between the one who was saved and the one who sought destruction, should be temporarily dissolved. Not permanently, not as a statement that the distinction does not matter, but for one day, in the specific kind of freedom that exists on the other side of having faced the worst and survived it. The carnival takes over. The noise at Haman's name is part of this. It is the community's active refusal to let the name carry the weight it was supposed to carry. Haman wanted to be remembered as the man who erased a people. The community responds by burying his name in noise every time it is read, by refusing to let it stand in silence. The noise is the same logic that named the festival after his tool. You tried to use this against us. We turned it into something else. Now the question that has been living underneath this entire story: if God is not named in the book of Esther, if the divine presence is hidden rather than announced, if what looks like providence could also be read as a sequence of fortunate coincidences, why does a community that has known more than its share of decrees and appointed dates and systems designed to erase it continue to gather every year and read this story out loud and make noise at the name of its villain and dress in costumes and give gifts and eat and drink and celebrate? What exactly is being celebrated? One answer is the survival itself. The fact that on the appointed day the people who were supposed to die did not all die. That a second decree arrived. That communities gathered and defended themselves. That the machinery of destruction was built by a man who is dead, and the people he built it for are still here. Another answer goes deeper. The festival celebrates the shape of how the survival arrived. The sleepless king, the open chronicle, the forgotten debt, remembered at the exact moment it needed to be remembered. The woman who stopped hiding at the precise moment when stopping was both most necessary and most dangerous. The gallows that became its builder's execution. The lot that gave 11 months instead of 11 days. Each of those moments is individually ordinary. A person cannot sleep. A record is opened to a page. A woman chooses her moment carefully. Take any single one of them in isolation, and it explains nothing beyond itself. But trace the full chain, and the shape of it becomes difficult to account for by probability alone. The festival does not resolve the question of whether what shaped that chain was providence or chance. It gathers the community every year to read the story out loud, to make noise at the name that tried to end them, to wear the costumes that honor the woman who lived by hiding and chose to be seen, to give to each other because the survival was shared, to give to the poor, because the survival of a community requires the survival of its most vulnerable members. Esther herself wrote it down. She and Mordecai sent letters to all the Jews in every province, requiring that these days be observed in every generation, in every family, in every province, in every city. She did not trust that survival would carry its own memory forward automatically. She understood the gap between witnessed and inherited memory, between the generation that lived through something and the generation that only heard about it. She wrote the observance into the record the way Mordecai's act of loyalty was written into the chronicles. Deliberately, in writing, so that it would not be lost. Because things can be lost. The memory of what happened fades faster than the people who survived it expect. The children of those who live through a crisis do not automatically carry the weight of what their parents carried. The distance between experiencing something and inheriting the memory of it is a gap that only deliberate transmission can bridge. She wrote it down. It was not lost. The scroll of Esther has been read in communities from Persia to Babylon, to Alexandria, to Rome, to Spain, to Poland, to Brooklyn, to Tel Aviv. Across every century since the events it describes. In every country where Jewish communities have found themselves building lives inside empires that were not built for them, it has outlasted every empire it was ever read inside. And still, every year, the scroll is unrolled. The name comes up. The noise starts. The costumes go on. The gifts are given. The poor are remembered. The feast happens. The question the book refuses to answer is still alive inside the celebration. If God is not named in this story, was he absent? Or was he hidden in every moment that falls exactly where the story needs it? The scroll does not tell you. It only tells you what happened. And what happened is that a people marked for death is still here. Still reading the story of the woman who survived by hiding and chose to be seen at exactly the right moment. Still making noise at the name that tried to erase them. Every year, out loud, still here,